Well, if you are here to see how Harbison Walker International, HWI, has unleashed continuous innovation, you have come to the right place. So we are joined here today by Dave Elias, Vice President of Supply Chain Management at HWI, Josh Stauffer, Senior Director of IT, also at HWI. And the journey HWI has been on has been enabled in no small part by implementing some enterprise and supply chain applications from Oracle. We are also joined on this panel by John Barkis, Group Vice President at Oracle. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Thank you.
I guess the place to start is at the very beginning. So maybe we'll start with HWI, and maybe you can tell me a little bit about who your company is and what your company does, and explain your supply chain a bit.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Yeah, I want to take a couple minutes here to talk a little bit about Harbison Walker and give you a little background. So Harbison Walker is the largest supplier of refractory products and services within the U.S. and Canada. We have over 150 years of refractory experience and leadership throughout this industry, going back to the age of Andrew Carnegie. Really, we have roots all the way back here, headquartered here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, with locations throughout U.S. and Canada. For those of you that don't know, like me, when I started here at Harbison Walker, I wasn't real clear on refractories. Refractories is a chemical engineered product, whether it be brick or like Quikrete in a bag. It is chemical engineered to withstand high temperatures. So we line things like molten steel ladles to keep the molten steel from melting the actual steel ladle, or the simplest example is really lining pizza ovens to withstand the heat of the pizza and keeping that temperature going. So it's a long-standing industry. Refractories complicated around ceramics and chemical engineered products. So it's a very challenging and old school industry, but obviously still necessary with what we're doing today to try to keep the industry going. We are, as we said, primarily locations. We'll talk about the supply chain locations, U.S. and Canada, but we are primarily there, but we do have a global presence. Globally, we have somewhere around 1,500 employees, and really looking to be a driver to be the first and only call for our customers that need refractory.
And Dave, maybe you could talk about the supply chain.
Sure. I would say HWI has a rather complicated supply chain. As Josh said, we have 18 operating locations in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. We also do have a couple locations that are outside of that area. One in the UK, one in Asia. We also have 20 plus service centers in North America and Mexico. And so, so a lot of moving parts. We're moving product all over the place. As far as items go, when I say complicated, I mean, we have tens of thousands of items. So many items. Most are items that we manufacture. There are some items that we do purchase outright. Very, very few though. And the items are mixed between customer specific items, and some are universal that we can sell to multiple customers across multiple business segments. And also that mix is a mix of between make to order items as well as make to stock items. And the majority of those make to stock items are tied to some sort of special JIT or supply chain program with our customers directly.
Beautiful. And John, maybe the same question about Oracle. Oracle is a big company that does so many different things, but maybe you could focus on the applications part of your business.
Sure. Thanks, Steve. Yeah. So as you just mentioned, Oracle's a large company, sells, lots of software in different areas. We have applications, technology, but in particular, we focus a lot on enterprise applications that really enable businesses to be able to, transform their businesses, to be more digitally enabled for this new age. And that really crosses, all of the segments of their business, from HR through financials through manufacturing, then all the way up across through the supply chain and transportation. Oracle's gone through a transition ourselves the last few years. We really transitioned to be more of a service company focused on cloud applications, and we're very happy to be here and participate in this today.
Thank you. So I guess maybe this is a question for Josh. Josh, I mentioned in a very brief intro that you guys have put in several applications from Oracle. Can you sort of give me a timeline and why you decided you needed to do this?
Absolutely. So I think the start of our journey is similar to a lot of organizations that do continue down this path or do initiate this path, really. Starting here in 2016, walking in here, we had a lot of disparate applications, the spider web of enterprise applications, custom and implemented within the applications. We were version locked on our current ERP system. We really couldn't get out of that. It was about 15 years old, and we were looking to transform our supply chain, honestly. When it came down to that, the biggest driver around that was our supply chain. Everything was being handled manually at that time. We wanted to move to a true planning system and get the benefits of analyses and artificial intelligence, and really setting that foundation for this company to move forward and really continue to disrupt the refractory market in that sense. So and the start of that was really building the infrastructure around applications, combining things into one data model, and Oracle ended up being the best fit for that as we look at CRM, ERP, quoting, warehouse management, and ERP, and planning applications. It was really the best fit for us, and we chose to move forward. We started that journey, implementation journey, in mid-17, really transforming the business overall supply chain with going live early 2019 with everything that we wanted to do. So we bit off a lot of things along the way, but we knew where we wanted to get to, and transforming an older industry like refractory, we knew that we had to do something as these markets continue to change, and refractory is sometimes viewed a little commodity within our industry, but obviously we needed to figure out how we were going to transform our business and move forward.
Yeah, and Josh, there's never ever any implementation of an enterprise application that is flawless. There can be technology issues, there can be people issues, there can be process issues. So I'm guessing you had a few of those.
So all of the above, as you would expect. I think when you look at it overall, we bit a lot of off there to chew when we initiated this, and going from transforming the supply chain and transforming our business, the system that people are used to, going from a green screen type system to really a true web system. And not to forget, at the same time we chose to do this implementation, we were building a highly integrated and automated monolithic plant, which is our a plant where we generate really bulk bags of this, essentially quickcrete in a bag. We were endeavoring on that implementation as well. At the same time, we were doing an applications implementation. So some of the challenges we ran into were really, the big ones was that trying to do too much and balancing our people, which created challenges around how we were doing implementations and how we were going to change things with the new manufacturing plant, along with our old processes. A lot of it was change management. That's typical on that one, really getting to all of our locations. Dave touched on that, how many locations we actually have and had to get to, and the number of people and the number of processes that we were changing. We underestimated a little bit of the attention that we needed to get to those people. So that was we ran into several of those challenges when we went live on day one. We did build and ship an invoice product really day one when we did it, so there was some success to that. We did have some technology challenges. We were early adopters around, you could say, some of the planning modules as well as integrations with Oracle, WMS, and its ERP system. So we ran into some technical challenges on that. The analogy I like to use on that one, when we first went live, using a little bit of a crawl, walk, run approach, you're driving down the road, the guardrails are 10 feet off of each side of the road, there's grass there, you're not supposed to go there, but people were driving there anyhow. So we really had to bring those guardrails in on the system after we went live, and really figured out where people were finding holes in the system, things that we weren't anticipating. There were limits there that we didn't have in place that we had to get in place pretty quickly once we went live. So
Right.
it slowed some things down, created some technical challenges, but we did have to push through those. And by the time we got halfway through the year, we had a much better understanding of where we were headed.
So not many 40-hour weeks there for a while.
Sure. Yeah. We were busy. Yes.
Yeah. And John, when it comes, when it comes to implementations of complex things like enterprise applications, what sort of advice would you give to people that are thinking about this journey to just make it go better?
No, I think a great question. I think a lot of companies will think, you can just turn something on, but that's really not the case. And as Josh kind of articulated, there's lots of business issues, and there'll be technology issues and implementation and really just adoption, I think, becomes somewhat of a challenge. So I think the first thing is to really identify a vision. Where is it that you want to go? So you have a roadmap on how you want to get there. It's always critical to get executive, management support to make sure that people are dedicated and focused on that, which really aligns to this idea that you have dedicated resources and really knowledgeable resources to execute. I would also say that you have to have a good partner. I think as Josh stated, as you go through this implementation, you run into challenges, you want to make sure that the entire team helps to resolve those. And I think one of the interesting things as we transition to the cloud, it's make it easier to do that. And partly it's because our innovation cycle is much quicker. So if in fact issues do arise, either maybe some were unforeseen, the ability to address those and really to become what we hope is an extension of the IT organization at, the company, like Harbison Walker or any other company that would implement, that we're able to engage and real time to help to address some of the concerns that they have and challenges. And I think overall, companies really need to be able to manage, that whole change management process. How do you, and sometimes you kind of look at the implementation team and think that's enough. And yet there's a lot of places that get touched, your suppliers, your customers, and other elements. And you have an opportunity to really enable and improve your business. And then in order to take advantage of some of those improvements, really requires a lot of education.
Josh, was this public cloud for you, public cloud implementation?
Yes. Yeah, I was actually going to add, as John kind of alluded to on that one, bringing in the Fusion Cloud of Oracle. Another challenge that we had is that culture shift from you have a version, you're going to deal with that within the application, to now moving to quarterly releases within the application and adjusting to those. So there's the plus and minuses of that. You're constantly getting updates. So every 3 months you're going through a regression test cycle, but you're actually getting new features. You're working with Oracle to build that roadmap, to be part of that roadmap, and get those additional features and bug fixes that you require, and managing on-premise applications prior to everybody ends up with their own different version and patch cycles and everything. But with this, it was a standard patching cycle. We knew the timing of it, and those quarterly releases were coming. So, being part of that, it's definitely different. We've seen the progression of it over the last 3 years, and managing that and improving our internal processes to adapt to that. But it is kind of intriguing. It can get tiresome sometimes, but it's also intriguing to see as those quarterly releases come out and they continue to enhance that application. And we can use that. That's irrelevant. So it's been that's a big culture shift for a lot of people. And even talking to other Oracle customers, you have to change your overall ERP processes and teams to keep up with those. But there are benefits to it.
So part of your thinking around continuous innovation is you want an end-to-end solution, and in your case, it was mostly, if not all, Oracle. Would you mind sort of walking me through the different applications you have implemented, and if there's some that aren't implemented yet, they're on your roadmap?
So yeah, we've you know, our landscape and our footprint of modules is pretty large from an Oracle standpoint. When we first went live around 19, we started with CRM, recruiting, all of ERP, so all of financials, all of manufacturing, all of planning, and WMS, along with some of those additional financial modules around planning and budgeting and financial consolidation and close. So that's where we started. And since then we've gone live with now core and benefits around HCM. So those actually just recently went live for us, pretty successful go live, and we're seeing everything come together in one data model when you look at having employees and all the employee records in there and really associating it to the ERP records and everything. We've also have a roadmap around additional HR modules, now setting the platform to go forward from a people development standpoint as we look at talent, performance, compensation, learning management. These are all in the pipeline for this year as well to really continue to build around the HR side. We're looking at other modules, continuing to enhance the other modules around manufacturing as we look at IoT and preventive maintenance on the manufacturing side. And there's several other micro modules. We're looking more at contracts and things along those lines to continue to streamline our processes and really continue our digital transformation throughout Harbison Walker and really making things a lot more available to us quicker and easier. So
Yeah.
we got a nice roadmap ahead of us.
Yeah, you're still busy, still busy.
Yeah. Yep.
Dave, Josh was there from the beginning. I understand you came on board just as COVID was hitting. Can you talk a little bit, Josh, Dave, around the challenges associated with that?
Yeah, I mean, what a crazy time to join a company, right? So I started at the end of May. You know, the company, as the rest of the world, was in a state of flux, just trying to figure out where things were going. For us, it was mainly dealing with volatility in the volume. We saw an initial drop, and then there was all kinds of movement around related to the volatility there, and it brought into it was hit the ground running, and what do we need to do to keep things moving? And so there were changes that we made on the demand planning side or the demand forecasting side, everything from the process and the detail that we were asking for, as well as the cadence, increasing the cadence, try to catch up with the changes that we were seeing. And then there were corresponding supply planning adjustments that had to be made, things from, looking at that forecasting and making adjustments on what plants are running, what plants are not running, where are we getting pinched on capacity and where we have open capacity. So calendars, lead times, a lot of adjustments, again, just trying to deal with the volatility that we were seeing. And then you have the inventory piece of that too. So you had all these corresponding changes on the inventory, just trying again catch up to what was happening. So we dove in to make to order versus make to stock. We ended up moving because we saw some drop in some items. What made sense to have it as make to stock. We ended up moving stuff back to make to order. And then the stuff that remained make to stock, it was scrubbing those details on mins, maxes, order quantities, everything. Basically, the ROP setup for those make to stock items. And so,
Right.
And I would say probably the most significant thing was, it's when things get tough, it kind of exposes your weaknesses. And so when we were going through and trying to adapt and adjust all the changes that we were seeing, it really exposed some of the gaps in our SIOP process. And prior to me getting there, they anticipated they would have some trouble connecting. And so we built some inventories and did some things like that. But again, when it hit the fan, it did expose a lot of weaknesses in that process, in the SIOP process. And we started to see some signs too that it was starting to impact, impact our customers as well as some of our internal metrics. So it was, so the identification of those gaps were very, very important to us.
Right. So it sounds like, Dave, part of it was, when lead times change, that's just, you got to change those parameters in your systems and keep up to date with it.
Right.
But when you're changing from make to order to make to stock, that's a much more significant change that you have to make at the application level. So a mix of, things that are kind of easy and things that are kind of hard.
Yeah. And some of it, and so like talking about some of the gaps specifically, we learned very quickly our forecasting process was not robust enough. And again, we say the only the supply chain thing that we always say is the only thing you know about a forecast for sure is that it's going to be wrong. And but we weren't even capturing the right information at a detailed level enough, and we weren't measuring variability. And you need to build that database over time so you can adjust inventory levels, safety stock levels, all of that. And so, but it just wasn't robust enough. The other thing in more detail around that was it wasn't connecting all the way back to purchasing. And so we weren't, we did a great job of getting started with the system and building, the items, the bill of materials. But it did expose that because we had so many items, and I think maybe we kind of rushed to it, and maybe the data going in wasn't great when we transitioned from the old to the new system. When we went from our old legacy system into Oracle, we moved data over, and what we found was that it was somewhat incomplete in certain areas and inaccurate from a bill of material standpoint. So once we got the demand forecast lined up, it wasn't making that connection all the way at the item level for us to figure out what we needed to go purchase.
Right.
And complicating that too is a lot of our raw materials, the lead times are long. And so that's how it like kind of all cascaded from our forecast process wasn't robust enough. We had to, we maybe had incomplete or inaccurate bill of materials, wasn't making that connection to purchasing. And, and it even helped us figure out that we might not have been organized, internally to deal with some of the gaps. And I would say probably the biggest gap, one of the biggest gaps is we didn't have clear ownership of who owned the items. It was kind of a shared ownership across the company. We went through that transition, and we had kind of one person who was more from Josh's team, who was charged with building items. But as far as where all that information and that, on just how we make stuff was coming from, it was scattered across the company. And so, we're so as far as building items, changing items, understanding the bill of materials, with our work plans and routings. And so we're working on that one. But I would say the single biggest gap was we never really set up the system to manage capacity, from how we built assets to how we built the items, and to how we built the bill of materials. And so again, back to these gaps, it's looking at it in a positive way. We had come so far so fast, and worked so hard to get things launched. The gaps, it helped us to outline not only what the gaps were, but what the priority was for attacking the gaps.
Thank you. And John, I imagine your customers have been dealing with COVID in all sorts of different ways. At a high level, are you seeing any trends, John, around the way your customers deal with COVID and enterprise applications?
Yeah, so actually a few. So first off, what's interesting is I think companies have been moving towards digitizing their business and becoming more efficient, kind of enabling a lot of the practices that Josh and Dave talked about for some time. But COVID has really accelerated a lot of those, and partly it's because those that were better prepared at the entry to it, have been much more successful, during the process and during the last year. And Dave really points out some really good points. Is that in COVID, no one knew how it was going to impact each individual business, and it's impacted them many different ways. And he's talked about this, make the stock to make the order, and probably back a little bit to make the stock, and how do you transition, and how do you react to different conditions, and how do you address new opportunities, and really the key is to be able to do that as quickly as possible to minimize some of that latency. And a lot of the foundation that kind of Josh articulated around, tying all these pieces together, it really allows companies to be able to enable, their business in such a way that they can react much faster to changing conditions than they could do otherwise. And I think the integrated nature of the applications, we put a lot of focus on that, partly because it does minimize some of the efforts associated with adjusting to changes, because you're not, company themselves doesn't have to worry about, how do they, keep these, various integrations in sync, how do they, manage the integrations between them, how do they, deal with different versioning, and a lot of that is now Oracle's responsibility, and the ability to be able to push that into the cloud, helps us to innovate faster, and really we can react faster, which hopefully helps our clients, our customers react much faster also. So I think I think Josh and Dave did a really great job of summarizing, the needs and changes of their individual company, but at the same time, it's really reflective of a lot of things that we're seeing. And I think the foundation that they're laying is really going to help them not only now, but hopefully into the future.
So Josh, I want to jump back to you. You were around from the beginning. When you decided on this journey, you put a business case together. You were shooting for certain business benefits. COVID came along. So, what benefits have you achieved? And the more quantitative you can get, the better.
So, yeah, I know it's a common question when you look at overall transformations around applications. Obviously, when you're trying to look for what are the benefits, and just going back to what we mentioned, we knew we were transforming the entire business, and we set the business case forward with the idea of we know we're going to take a crawl, walk, run approach to this, and we knew to that. And yeah, unfortunately, I think Dave kind of hit on it a little bit. When you look back, we were essentially 1 year in to a brand new ERP implementation, business transformation, when COVID hit. So when the pandemic hit, there's obviously restructuring that we had to do as part of that. We saw an impact to our business. We had to do some restructuring that did have impact on people. So as we adjusted to that and looked at some of how we were going to continue to improve some of the business processes, some quick examples, I think now we are closing our books a little bit faster than we were previously, and we've definitely brought days down from that. With the automated processes that we have and using some of the additional tools. We've streamlined several things around some order management and trying to get dates. I think we're getting there, and configuring the tool to match our processes a little bit when we look at getting dates out to the customers that comply with what our capacity is. I think we had a good approach in saying that this is where we started, and to Dave's point around the items, we're missing some of that data. But I think in a natural maturity of going from complete non-planning to planning, taking that step that now we're mature enough within the organization that we can move to plant capacity and get us a little bit better off in scheduling. But we're now we're seeing the benefits of having all of our systems tied together with the CRM and the quoting tools and the visibility into the data that we have now and that we've gained over the last year and a half. Is really providing that foundation for us to move forward. So it's tough to quantify that a little bit but the data we have available that makes decisions faster than we did previously, really around manufacturing and some of the order management pieces, and just really getting, combining all of that to know that the CRM data, that we're managing opportunities that now can supply forecasting. This is still data, people managing it, but we're getting close to say, oh, you have this many opportunities open. Should we forecast for them to feed into that forecast to really get to the planning stages? So, everything coming together. The integrations actually are our team. I will say that I have a pretty good development team that's figured out the integrations with Oracle and getting data in and out of the system and moving those processes forward. We've been really successful in getting that and really streamlining some of those pieces. There's pockets here and there around procurement and requisitions and things that you can kind of say that is easier than what it was previously. It's just having one system right now and growing to that. We know that the future for us, as we talked about maintenance and IoT and things that we can get to improve our manufacturing process, it is much clearer now than it was 18 months ago, 2 years ago, essentially now than it was previously. And we're setting those plans now, and we're going to make a difference on that. But, they're not as quantifiable as you'd like to be, especially what we've seen in the last 2 years, but we know we're going to get there.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think, service improvements do often, usually result in better sales. Better tools for the salesman result in better sales. But no one wants to say it's because of the system. It's really, the sales guy, am doing a better job. It is hard to quantify. It sounds to me like you've built a platform, though, where you can speed improvement in a way that you couldn't in the past.
Yes, I think that's the best way to put it. It's a platform to really springboard us into the future, to really make decisions better, faster, and continuing. We're all in that same boat. We have to continue to drive cost out of our products and the manufacturing, and continue to deliver to our customers when they expect. So, we believe that we are there, and we've made some right decisions around that. But it's mentioned before, we got lots of projects to go. Unfortunately, with fewer people now than what we had previously, but we know that roadmap's still there, and we're doing everything we can to get there. So it's a good problem to have.
Right. And John, when I think about the kind of end-to-end transformations that HWI has gone through, I would expect that they're going to be able to hold less inventory and still hit their service levels. That would probably be one expectation for me. What else would you expect, John?
Yeah, I think some of the biggest benefits is minimizing some of the latency in the system and having better tools to make better decisions. I think Josh kind of articulated some of that, but the idea that you have a connected system, usually leads to that ability to be able to react faster, and partly that then enables some of those things like reducing your inventory, improving your on-time performance, be able to commit better, make better commitments to your customers, be able to meet your dates a little bit better. Those are the kinds of things that we see, in the manufacturing across the supply chain. You're actually able, in many instances, to do more with less. Better. What we consistently hear is that you have less inventory, but you're actually performing better, and that's kind of the best of both worlds. And a lot of that is just through the connectivity. I think Dave hit on it a little bit at the beginning. One of the big challenges for companies is sometimes you enter in a lot of the data from your existing system, bring it in where there weren't as many dependencies on that data. And now all of a sudden you have a system and everyone's dependent upon the same data. So if you get the data in a good condition, good shape, all of a sudden your lead times are working, which now implies that your order promising gets better, your commitments are better, all of the benefits that you get out of the system are much more improved. So I think across the board, I guess I'll just summarize it, is you get significantly more with less. And I think by doing that, you get better performance with the customer. And I think, Steve, you alluded to it also, is once you start performing better, the customers are happier. And then, ultimately, your business starts to expand because of it. Go ahead, sir.
I was just going to add that you mentioned about inventory reduction. We're even changing our messaging to go from the last maybe 18 months was centered around inventory reduction. Now we are, we have the data and we're all working from the same data. And now that it's transitioning from reduction to optimization of that inventory. in support of our customers. And so that's like some of the big hairy goals that we have rolling into 2021 is to optimize that investment we're making in the inventory.
Well, I think that's a good point. You know, the theme of our forum is digital transformation, right? And you know, anytime you're using paper, you're not digital, right? So if in the warehouse you're using paper to go and do picks, that's not very digital. So, but I think there's different levels of digital transformation, and I think getting to a digital twin, getting to optimization. Josh, you were mentioning predictive maintenance. That's I think that's a machine learning problem. That's pretty advanced stuff. So when you think about sort of the more advanced digital transformation initiatives, in addition to some of the optimization, in addition to predictive maintenance, anything else that's sort of you're thinking that might be a pretty interesting thing to pursue?
Yeah, from our side, we actually just talked about this yesterday. We have a team formed and we're going and looking at these different things. And some of it is when we look at capacity, plant capacity, that's based on assumptions of run rates. And now, we have to press brick with hydraulic presses or whatever. And depending on the material that comes through or whatever, that press could be varying in their rates that are being pressed, and it could slow down. I think in some cases, we know that we've seen a 40% slowdown in a couple areas, but we don't know why, and we don't have the data to analyze that to know why. It's just a fact that, we expected 100 and now we're getting 60 out and in the same time frame, but why we don't have the data today to really analyze that. So that's what we're setting a path forward and looking at that, like where that data needs to come from. We have the sensors on the floor to control that. Do we have the sensors? Do we need to add something? What's the data we're collecting? Moisture content, outside temperature, whatever it might be. We're looking at those really enhanced features around the application of where we can collect it, where we can make decisions, and really put it in front of people like Dave faster. They can click a button and see this and say, wait a minute, we're trending down at this specific plant because of something's going on. We know we need to drill into that now. We don't have that today. A lot of that's, I think some of it's observed and then we say, yeah, we're down 30%. Okay, based on that, let's adjust our capacity, but we don't analyze that. But we're getting the tools in place. We have a lot of team, the IT team working with our manufacturing engineers really to pull this together and really get to some of that advanced, cool stuff, especially for technical geeks like us, that we can throw data in front of people all they want and make decisions based on it and say, we're going to improve the business and here's how. That's where we're going to get to. We have a good vision on it. Again, it's just getting that time and where do we focus? Where's the priority with the number of plants that we have throughout the U.S.? Where do we focus that? Where's the biggest impact to our customers to make sure we can deliver?
And Dave, you mentioned optimization, right? I think one of the biggest opportunities around sort of the next generation of digital is optimization depends so much on lead times and other key parameters. And it's so easy to stick those parameters in and forget about them. And they change over the time. They need to be updated. So some sort of way of automating that can make the supply chain optimization work so much better. Is that anything you're exploring?
Well, I back to that, the single biggest gap in our inability to manage or plan capacity, where that capacity is based on or provide promise dates out of the gate that are based on the availability of the bill of materials as well as the availability of capacity. Right now, our lead times are set at a static level. And so if we want to make changes, we have to go in and change it. And so, to me and to really us as a company, because we decided to move in this direction, I would say it's more of a refresh or a rebuild of that infrastructure, and to make sure that we are setting ourselves up so we can plan capacity. And so again, we're going to refresh and rebuild on the assets and include what get aligned with manufacturing and say what truly is our capacity. And so we're gathering OEE type data, operational availability, how that component of it, how often is that available? And so making sure that we have a really good understanding of what that capacity is, get aligned on it and put it in the system, right? The second piece is refreshing on the items. And that includes having the bill of materials be complete and accurate, as also making sure that we have a standard flow or a standard work plan that's built in, and doing a refresh on that. And we're looking at at our ability to plan capacity as the key enabler for a whole bunch of things. So once we get that infrastructure refreshed, I would say the good news is we're not starting from scratch, and Oracle's ready for us. And so we just got to get there. So we're going to do that refresh and rebuild things, and get us into a position where we can really plan capacity. And so as our, things happen every day, right? In manufacturing floors, you have orders coming in, you have stuff being processed and shipped, and you have equipment that's, running, and equipment that's not running at times. And so having that real-time data at our fingertips to help us anytime, whether it's a quote or whether it's a live order, to be able to come up with promise dates out of the system without having to ask people. I don't want to have to call the plant and say, hey, can you do this in 5 weeks? I want the system to be able to deliver it and say, yes, I have the raw materials, and yes, I have the capacity, and to be able to give us a good date out of the gate. And so we think about starting all the way to the customer, and the customer experience improvements that we'll get just by rebuilding on that infrastructure, as well as being able to do a refresh on our costs and have a really good understanding of what our costs are and how they've changed. And then really freeing up our manufacturing folks to focus on execution and back to manufacturing, instead of having to tell us when they can get it and how they're going to make it. And so doing that refresh is going to be a key enabler to kind of tying that all together. And then all the way back to one of the other gaps, and being able to tie it to what we're actually buying with those long lead times. And so we're trying to mitigate those long lead times by putting agreements in with suppliers and all of that. But even so, the requirement for those kind of arrangements are a good solid forecast, that you're updating all the time. And so that's why rebuilding that infrastructure is going to be a key enabler for us to get down the road on really using the functionality that's there waiting for us. We talked about enterprise asset management, getting on that, getting into Oracle production scheduling. And so instead of our homegrown tools. And so there's a lot of tools ready for us. We're just not in a position to get there yet. And so
Right.
2021 is going to be a very big transition year for us to close those gaps and get us ready for the next level of tools that are waiting for us.
Well, gentlemen, to sum it up, you really have a vision of end-to-end applications, real-time visibility as a platform to build upon. We promised our users we keep these to 45 minutes. We're right at about 45 minutes. I think this has been a tremendously interesting conversation. I'd like to thank all of you for taking the time to participate in this panel.
Thanks for having us, Steve. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Good to see you.